Hey guys, today's going to be the first video in a series of videos I'd like to do about my philosophy behind raid leading, or maybe limits philosophy around raid leading. It's going to feature things like, communication, guild morale, common mistakes, how to set up your UI, what kind of fights are good for raid leaders and what fights are not very good for raid leaders. Like there's fights where you could really impact it and some where you can't. Guild management stuff, how to pick really good officers, what kind of jobs officers should do, how to handle, having multiple cliques in your guild and what to do in some situations like that, some recruiting tips, all kinds of stuff that's coming in the future. Today I want to focus on what actually is raid leading. A lot of people don't really know what kind of effect it can have because maybe what they've been used to from a raid leader isn't exactly like the top of what it can be. And not even like the very, very best. I just mean just having the right mindset for it. And then what actually does raid leading do? Because you can kill every single boss in this game without a raid leader. And what a lot of guilds do is they kill bosses without raid leaders. They have a guy that, says something maybe in between pulls or calls out maybe one or two mechanics, but that's not really doing what that job is. It kind of is, and I'll get into why there is some guilds that are kind of like that. But it's like this, if you take a boss like Zakul, for example, where you have tentacle spawns all around the platform, you could do that boss over and over and over again until all 20 people figure out exactly when they're coming and exactly how they can live it on their own. Or you can sacrifice one person's playing ability to make sure he knows exactly where the safe spot is, mark it on the ground or mark himself, and let everyone else not think about it and play better because they're able to focus on other things. Another example would be how Stone Legion Generals works, right? There's a cast sequence on how things work. There's like a certain priority the boss will pick from. You could have all 20 of your raiders throughout all of the pulls you do on that boss know exactly what's coming next, or you could have one person take a lot of time to memorize what the cast sequence priority is, and you'll know ahead of time what stuff's going to be, and you can inform the other 19 players rather than them having to all figure that out on their own. Both situations kill each boss. You still kill Zakul with everyone YOLOing tentacles on their own. You still kill generals with everyone YOLOing every mechanic as it happens. The difference is the guild with a really good raid leader that really focuses on everyone else and not himself is killing that boss a lot earlier than a guild who's not. Also, maybe the best example would be a boss that's on everyone's mind right now that they've done in this raid, being Hungering Destroyer. I think it's a fight, one of the most in the tier actually, that is heavily carried by raid leading. Now, there's two strats, and I'll actually show you one right now. So you have here, this is me not doing it with my guild, mind you. This is doing it with Slightly Tilted. It's a US couple hundred ranks that I help work with on the side to become better as a raid leader, and then also just to help other people. I don't get paid for it or anything, just working with them. And I help them on this fight get their first kill of Hungering Destroyer. Now, look at this weak aura right here on the side. This is showing the entire health of everyone in the group, plus the absorbs on them. And if you can see, they have the yell weak aura that a lot of other guilds use. Now, when I watch most guilds do this boss, it's personal responsibility. Once you're on the correct marker, people in the raid know, hey, if this guy's getting low, we might need to heal them a bit. But I think it's hard to imagine that everyone in the raid is going to, focus on healing people when that can be handled by one person. And then if it's handled like it is for me, or how I do it on this fight, people never have to think about healing people. The way I do it is no one heals a single person on this fight unless I tell you to go in a circle. But when I tell you, all of you go in, because they only need to be healed at certain points. So people that are YOLOing it are probably getting a lot of stacks when they don't need to. They're either soaking people at full health, most likely, because I would imagine that people's awareness of other people's health pools on this fight in a lower ranked guild is probably not very high. So as you see the fight go on and stuff like this, like right here, you only basically need to heal people up after Desolates before Expunges to do this fight cleanly. And by doing that, you allow these people to only really focus on what they're doing. That is what raid leading is. So, and that's how much raid leading can carry on a fight like this. Like I said, you guys might have a raid leader that's like this. He doesn't say anything the whole fight except for Expunge here. And then after people come back in, new miasmas go out, right? Or you go to your markers and it's like, they're not saying anything, right? And they're like, all right, move for volatile ejections. But that's burying the lead. Everyone can read their timers. Sometimes it's really helpful to call stuff out, for sure. I'm not saying that's not true, but specifically on this fight, this is just a fight where if you have a raid leader fully focused on this, and before people say you can do this in or outside the raid. I do this inside the raid on this boss as well. This is just the video I used as an example, where if, let's just say I'm this hunter, but instead of doing 7k, I'm doing 5k, but every person in this raid knows when they need to heal people, you're going to kill this boss a lot faster. Even if it means, now that doesn't mean you have to be doing less damage, but if it does mean that you can't handle doing all of it at once and you don't have that kind of experience where, you know, you may lose some damage, it's worth it. It is worth it to raid lead properly. And this is a great fight to show an example of that. I'd actually make the argument that raid leading is the primary thing that separates guilds, probably in the world 50 to world 200 level. I would actually guess the player skill in those across those guilds is largely similar. I know there's some hour differences, like how many hours each guild's raids, but that's about what is separating them. Some of those guilds near the top that raid lower hours just have really great raid leading, and it's what separates them. At the top, it's a little different. Raid leading is super important, and the guilds at the top all have really strong raid leading. But it's also like player skill is such a huge metric. But like I said, the player skill at the top is so top loaded and insane. But a lot of lower ranked guilds have very, very similar player skill across the board, and it's really the kind of preparation, morale, and leadership that really sets it apart. So now that we've established a basis of like what it's actually doing for you, because a lot of people again are maybe not used to that, you kind of go how I got better at what I do now. Obviously, we ended up moving myself out of the raid, and I'll have a separate video about the 21st man and everything like that. But generally speaking, when I started raid leading in EN, Emerald Nightmare, and then all the way through today, I started out using all of my effort as a player. And then whatever mental capacity or bandwidth, my brain bandwidth, or like whatever I had left to handle raid leading was this. And I was a great player. And I came from DPSing and tanking at a top level and all of that. And I think when you start, you want to hold on to that. And you're like, yeah, I can add something else to my game. But I think then I didn't realize how important raid leading was. Like, it's the exact opposite. Over time, what I did was not think about owning as much, but from the very jump, you're giving this in raid leading as much as it possibly takes to make life easier for 19 people. And then whatever you have left, you play with that. On some fights, it's easier to raid lead and you can do a lot of stuff. Some fights are very, very difficult, and you'll notice, especially in early pulls, that you'll be maybe lacking behind in damage or something, trying to really set your guild up for success and identify what's going wrong, especially at the world first level. And and then by the end of progression, you may be doing really well, because after you've taught everything, it's just about making callouts and doing damage. You know, a lot of people can do just that. So that's kind of how we got to the level we're at now, or maybe I got to the level I got, is the more I took away from how much I focused on my playing ability, and then I swapped it to raid leading and then playing with whatever I had left, that's when we started getting really good. Because that was just something we didn't have. It's broken. Good raid leading is broken. It's so unbelievably helpful. The difference between bad and good is the difference of your players always looking for what's going on versus your players fully trusting that you will tell them if something's going on, and they basically just play their characters and let you hold them throughout the entire fight. That's what it should be. Now, some of you guys might be like, that's not what I'm used to, but that's honestly common. It's hard to find people who are really good at raid leading, because it's the whole act of doing it well is extremely self-sacrificial. You know, you're giving up a lot of yourself for other people. Not a lot of people are built for that. It's something a lot of people even have to learn. You know, if you have 100 guilds, so, you know, 2,000 people in those 100 guilds, if they all have 20, right? Probably, I don't know, maybe 50 to 60 total people out of those 2,000 are really natural born leaders that would be willing and skilled enough to make that that jump. So that's leaving 40 guilds, assuming 2 of them didn't end up in the same guild randomly. That's leaving 40 guilds with someone who is forced to lead or someone who wants to lead that doesn't really have what it takes. Or not what it takes as much as, just not being the right personality type for it. It's also why a lot of guild leaders or raid leaders in general, I think, end up tanking. Because that's also the tanking role, It's even though tanking is by far the worst role to raid lead from, and I'll go over that in a different video on why all that is, but it's when a tank leaves and someone has to tank the thing that no one wants to do, who better to do that than the guy that's already giving up whatever he can to make your guild better? So that's kind of usually how that works, right? And then the idea with the 21st man, which again, I'll go over into the advantages and disadvantages of the 21st man in a different video. But just to give you an idea of why I ended up outside of the raid is it's really simple. When your guild's getting better and better, when you take more and more away from what kind of attention span you're putting into playing your character, it makes all the more sense if you can do a lot of it outside the raid and you can go this raid leading, and then the guy who's in the raid is playing this much as a player, Even if you are the best player in your guild and you're really going for it, doing the outside the raid shit is obviously really, really good. Yeah, so that's just a small section of it. I just kind of wanted to break into it, give you my initial thoughts on how exactly raid leading works. I could have probably thought of some better examples, but it is what it is. So I will come at you guys with another video, hopefully within this week, discussing something I'm probably asked about the most, which is limits philosophy on our raid atmosphere, how we deal with morale, how I feel about communicating to people. I'm really passionate about it. Probably the thing I think about the most when raid leading, and maybe is the low-key most important thing about raid leading, is how you communicate to other players, and I'll be going over that in our next video. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you guys want to, I'll have some videos up at the end of the videos up in the corner at the end of the video if you want to go to the next one. Sorry, I'm new to YouTube. It'll probably be there. Anyways, see you guys.